before we jump into anything, I need to let y'all know, while Nick and I are presenting together here today, neither of us is speaking on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs, or commonly known as VA. Also important to note that our two organizations are not affiliated in any way, nor does either one endorse the other. We're just two practitioners here to talk with you all about the practice that we're doing and about some of the really cool things that are going on at VA in the Veterans Experience Office Design Lab, which is where the Institute is housed. And also, before I jump in, I know Lynn already said this, but we ask that you hold your questions until after. The original version of this presentation that we presented at the conference earlier this year had an interactive element in the middle. And so just for sake of virtual and kind of making sure that we get through the whole story, we want to hold all of that interactivity and that discussion until the end of the presentation. But we do look forward to all of your questions and anything that you want to know or you want to dig into a little bit further here. Next slide. All right, so a little bit about the VACX Institute. So our goal is to build CX mindsets and skill sets in VA. And by CX, we mean customer experience, and that includes employee experience. And this helps to make VA a world-class organization for veterans and our external customers, and a best place to work for our employees, our internal customers. And we do this by providing a space for the employees to develop, to practice, to connect, to innovate around customer experience improvement methodologies through the programs and the training and the community support that we offer, where we connect the experts in customer experience improvement with the novices or with our learners in VA. Next slide, please. Okay, so how, just a general overview on how we typically approach teaching customer experience in the VACX Institute. So any improvement in customer experience it takes culture change a lot of the time. And so we all know that culture change happens in drips and not floods. So you can't just be like, it's not a light switch that you can go in and flip and say, oh, I'm going to change the culture tomorrow. Tomorrow, our culture in this organization is going to be different, and we're going to do everything right with customer experience. We all know that it doesn't work that way, and humans don't work that way. So we always say it's a drip, not a flood, whenever we think about culture change and CX improvement. It occurs in many small drips, and every drip matters. Every one of those small changes, those incremental changes, matters and makes a difference toward that culture change. And so the way that we look at this is kind of our ripple effect. So we think about the leaders are influencing and impacting the employees and the experience of those employees within the organization, which in turn impacts the veterans, the survivors, the caregivers, the service members, our external customers that we serve. Next slide, please. All right, so let's get into ADDI plus HCD. That's a little ground setting around the Institute and kind of how we operate and what our philosophies are. But we're going to tell the story of a specific course that we built called Customer Experience Essentials for Leaders, or CXL for short, and how we built this award-winning program by combining HCD, or human-centered design, with the ADDI model that many of us know and love. And I'm going to start with a story of one of our superstar learners. So Lori, who is pictured here on the slide, Lori was a really active member of our pilot cohort and our advisory council as we were building this program. So Lori, I don't know if you're in the room or watching this recording, but really, really grateful to you for your contributions. I'm really excited to feature you in this presentation. So Lori is a leader in an office in VA that oversees sort of the backstage operations of getting veterans their benefits. And Lori was really honest and forthright with us about her struggles to relate to those customer experience improvement concepts that she was learning in Customer Experience Essentials for Leaders, which to her, she felt like it was so far away from her work to impact that customer experience because she was in the backstage part of VA. And Lori said to us, she said, we're so far removed. How can we improve CX from our lens, from where her team sits? And we knew that Lori's story resonated with a lot of the leaders in many parts of VA where those backstage operations were taking place that supported that front stage customer experience. And it illustrated a clear skill gap to us where VACXi could really make an impact. So VA strategic goal number one, so to align with our strategic goals here, VA strategic goal number one is to communicate consistently with our customers and build lifelong relationships and trust. And to help earn that trust as an institute, we're creating those learning experiences that equip the VA employees with the mindsets and the skill sets to understand and design services with the veteran at the center, and with their fellow employees at the center when that's applicable as well. So you can also see that that aligns with the goal of the Institute. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to give a quick overview here, and then Nick is going to get into each one of these phases of this process here. But I'm curious to know, you don't need to come on mute, just use your Zoom tools. Who's heard of design thinking? Anybody familiar with design thinking? I don't know if I can see like raise of hands or hearts or whatever y'all want to put up there. Or human-centered design. If you've hung out with me, I know that you've heard of human-centered design, definitely. So if you haven't, HCD or design methodology emphasizes the voice of the customer throughout the process. So not at the end, not just at the beginning, but through the whole thing as you're designing a product, or in this case, a learning experience. Common practices in human-centered design include speaking directly with your customers, building a deep understanding of who they are through qualitative and quantitative data and research, and using what we call iterative prototypes. So, and Nick will go into this in greater detail here in just a little bit, to get customer feedback before you implement a full-scale product to the masses. So, and as a result of that, as a result of including the customers, or in our case, the learners, throughout that process, using human-centered design really generates these products and services, or in this case, courses, that customers or learners really can use and benefit from, and that bring them joy, that they love, that they really enjoy being a part of. So how do we apply HCD in the traditional ADDIE process? So like I said, I'm going to give you an overview on the slide, and then Nick is going to go into each one of these things. So at VACXi, we use a 4-phase model to describe that HCD process, which you can see here on the slide, bottom row there. And it closely aligns with ADDIE. So you can see that we've been able to line those up for you to show you how they fit together. So just going left to right here. So analysis, which as we know is the A in ADDIE, it aligns with the discovery phase of human-centered design. And in the discovery phase of HCD, you're typically building in a first understanding of your customer. You're using secondary research, input from your SMEs, your subject matter experts, which sounds pretty familiar to those of us who have used ADDIE a lot, who have been in that instructional design process. The difference in HCD is that we in Discover, whenever we implement Discover as part of our analysis, we're really talking to those learners. We're really getting in there and talking with those learners. And we're using low fidelity prototypes. And by low fidelity prototypes, I mean something that doesn't require a lot of overhead. We can show you a sketch. We can show you a quick storyboard. You know, we can show you a thumbnail, whatever the case may be, that really doesn't require us to have a lot of effort or a lot of overhead, but has a lot of thought into it, so that we can then get that feedback from those learners early. Get feedback early and often is what we tend to say. So moving to the right there, the design phase of HCD aligns with ADDIE's design and development phase. So you can see I put those together in that bubble there. Designing and developing training elements in traditional ADDIE, which includes like your curriculum outline, development of your course materials, interactivity design, designing those interactions. Typically, what we tend to do is we say, oh, what did we learn in the analysis phase? And then we design those things based on what we learned in analysis phase, which makes a lot of sense. You know, it's very practical. In HCD, we use co-creation sessions with learners and with our customers in the room with us. So they're right alongside of us as we're doing all these things. We're continuously testing these things with them, making sure we speak their language, we understand what it is that they need and how that aligns with what we know that we need to teach. We also can use high fidelity prototypes. So we use the low fidelity prototypes in the analysis. Sometimes that even goes into design and development. So you may use, one, two, three prototypes as you go. But those higher fidelity prototypes are the ones that really incorporate that research we learned from analysis, and then give us what we need to invest a little bit more in that in a product, or I'm sorry, in a prototype that is really similar to kind of what we expect the final outcome to be. And then we get feedback from our customer on that as well. So moving to the right, during the implementation phase and deliver phase in HCD, they're very similar. So instructional designers already use a pilot. I'm sure a lot of you have piloted a course if you've been in the instructional design world, which is template. Basically when you would implement something or when you would deliver it. And during that implementation, it's important to gather the feedback that you need and the data that you need, qualitative and quantitative, to inform the evaluation phase. So we've gone all the way to the right here on the slide. And for us, we used listening sessions to gather that richer customer feedback. So we had 10-minute sessions with our learners after our high fidelity prototype or our pilot, where we really learned from them. We were able to couple that with our evaluation survey. So that very more typical sort of after the course survey to understand how the course went, how did they feel, that level 1 information. And then note here how evaluation and measure are happening throughout this process. And so it's happening all the way from analysis to implementation, and we definitely engaged in that. We made sure that we were engaging in formative evaluation all the way through this process, evaluating what we were doing, evaluating what our prototypes were, and continuing to improve based on that. And one more note here is you'll see that this looks very linear. So anybody who has ever engaged in instructional design, and Addie will tell you that it might look linear on the page, but it is not a very linear process. It's a process where you may circle back, and do ADD, and then have to go back and do some more A, or it might be Addie die die die, which is how I learned it back in the day. And so just know that HCD is very much the same. It's very similar. It looks very linear on this page in this model, but you can definitely go back if you need to do some more discovery before you get into design. Absolutely, you need to do that, learn some more, and then move forward in the process when you're ready. So just a quick note here before I hand it over to Nick to go into some more detail. We'd love to share with you how did we figure this out? How did we put these things together? So in Bob Ross's words, this was a happy accident for our team. The ask that we originally had, which became eventually CX Essentials for Leaders, was from our human-centered design chief at the time. And she came to us, the VACXi team, and said, hey, we really want you to figure out how to teach human-centered design to leaders in VA. That was the ask. That was a training ask and the skill gap that was going on there. And so the team formed, which, by the way, we have an amazing, wonderful team who is behind this. Nick and I are on the call. I think Deanne is on the call. I can't see everybody on here, so I can't tell who all from our team might be here, but shout out to our amazing team. And that team included both human-centered designers and instructional designers. So we were kind of put together on this team and said, go do this, go figure it out. And so instead of being at odds with one another and competing these methodologies, we brought them together and found this complementary way to perform ADDIE, or to perform instructional design, that really put the learner at the center of everything that we were doing using that human-centered design methodology. So we were really, really excited about that, which is why we were excited to share it at ISPI conference and really excited to share it with you all and beyond now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and Nick, you can go take us into some detail with these.
All right, sounds good. So taking a look a little bit closer, right? So I think Amy did a great job of the overview of the process, but let's get a little specific about how did we actually manage to blend these two things together? What were the elements that we found were particularly helpful or useful? So we'll start with what we have on the screen here is Discover. That's in the human-centered design framework, but in ADDIE, that would be our analysis phase. And our analysis phase started much the same way that the instructional designers on the call probably would think about. We started by going to our experts. So we had meetings with subject matter experts to better understand What was the organizational level skill gap? What did we need to focus on? Who might be our audience? We supplemented those perspectives with some extant data collection. We looked at what leadership training looks like at other organizations that are trying to teach CX to leaders. And then we also did a review of what are the existing courses in the organization itself. So at VA, what do we already have? And is there anything that might have the right content or applicability that could fit this training skill gap need? Uh, the comparison exercise was helpful in charting that out and figuring out, hey, do these things make sense? Do they match up? And what we found is that really for the specifics we were looking for, the existing training didn't hit the mark. So we needed to develop some new curriculum. So I think that sounds probably pretty standard so far. Now is where it gets a little more interesting. So here's where the human-centered design aspects begin to come into play. So we wanted to really empathize with our learners. Empathy, a key part of human-centered design, and putting yourself in your customer's shoes and trying to understand the world from their point of view. So what we did was we conducted semi-structured interviews with leaders that represented different potential audience segments, and we asked them about their experience. We wanted to understand what their pre-existing knowledge was, what their goals were, and how they preferred to learn. And so you can see on the screen here those initial insights from those 14 interviews that we did, or I think it was fewer with maybe a few leaders at a time. But you can see some of the takeaways. Concerns about having enough time to learn a brand new methodology, a need to tie the content to something actionable to justify the time. Things that maybe if we had spoken to the experts, we would have gotten a relative idea of that, but it was a little bit different when it comes from the learner's own words. So these insights helped us better understand the audience segments that we were working with. It helped us validate our draft learning objectives, and it helped us understand how would the learners prefer to learn these things that we're trying to teach. So I mentioned these conversations set us up for our learning objectives. You can see these are the some of the terminal learning objectives that we were working from. One important insight that we had from this conversation is that there was a very important affective component to the program that we were trying to put together, or for the intervention we were trying to put together. Skills and knowledge gaps were a component of it, but there was definitely an attitude change, a commitment change that was needed in order to get the learners to be demonstrating the behaviors that we wanted them to walk away with. So that was a really key insight and informed a lot about our decisions about what type of modality is going to help us get to affective change, and what are the types of activities or experiences that we need to create for beyond just how we transmit the information. All right, and here's where we get really human-centered design focused. So what we did in order to figure out more information, to choose the right modality, to choose the right audience segment, all of those different pieces, was use low-fidelity prototypes. So if you hear the word prototype and you're not 100% sure what that means, in typical instructional design, you probably do a pilot, your first sort of test run of your materials. That's what we would call probably a high fidelity prototype, meaning that it's a really close representation of what your final product's probably going to look like. But a prototype doesn't have to be all the way downstream to a pilot. It could be a lot earlier in your process and can be a lot lower investment. So what we came up with was doing this low investment. Let's find a way to represent a few different options for our learners, and then let's talk to our learners directly and see what they prefer, how they respond to these different options that we put in front of them. So we used a virtual collaboration tool called Mural to draft these 3 prototype ideas that you see on the screen here. So each of the different prototypes explores a sort of a different level of challenge, and it represents different modalities that you might experience, different levels of cognition that you might reach, different outcomes for the learners, and then sort of a different program experience that we would expect. Really importantly, we're presenting this to non-instructional designers. So it was important for us to make these very easy to understand and interpretable. So we didn't use concrete learning objective language the way that we would on the previous slide. Instead, we tried to put it in a what's in it for them type context. Try to explain what are the outcomes that these people are likely to experience. And we also did this fun little categorization. We named each of these prototype options after an exciting trip that someone might have or an exciting experience they might have, instead of just labeling it training option 1, training option 2, training option 3. We took these low fidelity prototypes, we set up some meetings with potential learners, and so we actually presented these to them and then asked them questions about what they thought. We asked them a few questions about what would the support from the organization need to look like if you were to meet the goals that you might identify in these different prototypes. Is it really realistic that you could get away for 3 days to do an in-person learning retreat? Is it really realistic that you could dedicate the time to do self-paced learning on your own with everything on your plate? Those are the types of questions that we were asking to help us understand the perspective from the learner side. These prototype tests helped us choose a modality, choose an option. And what we found was that the learners were really interested in a pretty high level of cognition and pretty rigorous development of some new skills and knowledge, and that was going to require a significant commitment from them, and it was going to require a significant commitment from the organization. And so to talk a little bit more about how did we come to that conclusion and what were some of the things we learned, Amy, I'll send it back over to you.
Sure. Yeah. So next slide. Yep. So we synthesized the data or analyzed the qualitative data that we got from these low fidelity prototype tests with our customers. And that allowed us to glean insights. And those insights informed those recommendations that Nick is talking about for in-person delivery methods. So we heard our learners, our prospective learners, loudly and clearly that they knew that they would need in person. It would be challenging in terms of the organization being able to support that. We also understood that this needed to be for a specific subset of leaders or of learners, rather than for all leaders across VA, forever and ever. We also were able to recommend organizational support that would be required for those leaders, as Nick said, to meet those outcomes, to achieve that desired level of Bloom's cognition that we really needed to get them to meet the goals that we knew the organization needed. Additional insights from the low fidelity prototype testing provided a foundation for the team to design the training in a way that provided measurable, tangible outcomes for learners, which is what we heard in our initial interviews, and created opportunities for networking and relationship building, which is also something that we heard from the learners and that we heard our stakeholders wanted our learners to be able to do. So we presented all of this to key stakeholders to gain buy-in and get support for the design and development phases. And what we ended up landing on is a residency. So as Nick said, a 3-day residency and 2 follow-up virtual sessions. So you'll hear me refer to both components of those courses or both components of that course. But you can see the synthesis process in action here on the slide, and those of you who are qualitative researchers in the group will probably recognize this process. So we gather the data from the interviews. We're going to aggregate that across the different questions. We start to order that data and kind of figure out where it fits with things across the different interviews, across the different resources. And then we use our intuition and our qualitative research analysis methods to identify those themes and implications of what we've learned to inform those recommendations. So like I said, in-person program is preferred by this audience due to the benefits of that networking and their ability to focus only on the content rather than have those distractions that a virtual option might present for them. Next slide. So speaking of the virtual option, the question that we always get asked as instructional designers and as learning and development professionals, can't you just do it virtually? Why can't you do it virtually? And we always need to justify, why we can't, or why we shouldn't, why we should recommend an in-person option if we feel that's the best route to go. So we got the data that we needed to advocate for resources to support that option, and that we knew the organization needed. So it wasn't just what learners wanted, it was also what we knew that we needed to get them to that higher Bloom's level for the maximum impact of this customer experience improvement from these leaders. So we outlined the leadership, how we worked in collaboration with partners across VA and VBA, the Veterans Benefits Administration, to determine the needs for the curriculum. So that was an advisory council that we put together, the delivery platforms that we would need, audience size, and the resources that we would need. We also were able to demonstrate some cost savings here at this stage, some potential cost savings if we were to go through with this in-person or residency option. So by targeting our audience to the right group of learners who were most likely to make the largest impact because of the training, we were able to say, we really want those innovators and early adopters. So any Rogers fans in here that know diffusion of innovations, we, instead of training all the people, we could demonstrate cost savings by training the right people to reach all of the other people through their spheres of influence. So starting with those innovators and early adopters, instead of spending a ton of money to just go out and train everyone and hope for the best, we wanted the people who we thought could go out and not just teach this, but really give that example and be the example of what they've learned. And we've seen that happen. Really exciting to see that happen as we've deployed this training. The second way that we demonstrated some cost savings is that VA is a huge organization, right? It is a giant organization, and so none of our team members had worked within VBA, which is where we focused this training before, and so we weren't really sure of the lay of the land. It was a part of the organization that we didn't know well, but through these partnerships of this advisory council that we had, really understand, working with VBA's learning and development department really closely, that helped us to build those partnerships within this huge organization, where we could share space and resources at no additional cost to our team and no additional cost to our learners. And so we were able to make that very, very efficient in working together for cost efficiency and for time efficiency as well. And so in return, in the spirit of partnership, we offered the hosts who provide us with the classroom and also all of our advisory council members seats in our classes, and we still do that today. So we did that for this pilot, and we continue to maintain those partnerships and are really grateful for those. But it does help us to demonstrate those cost savings in as we were asking for these resources for our leadership. The other thing we were able to do is that we were able to align the benefits of an on-site residency, that in-class portion, that in-person portion, with breaking down the silos in the organization. So we heard that learners wanted that. We heard that our key stakeholders wanted that, and we were able to demonstrate, hey, we get them in the classroom together, we get them collaborating, and we can start to break down those silos. And I'm also really excited to report that we have seen that happening throughout our CXL classes since we've done this pilot. And also, that is something that we wouldn't have learned through a traditional audience analysis. So really getting in there and understanding those learners, we had that deep understanding. We're able to appeal to leadership and help them to understand why we needed this in-person residency. All right, so next slide. So by the end of the pilot, we had earned our learners' trust. This is the exciting part that I love. We're going to get into evaluation and what happened. So we got to this residency portion of the pilot, and because we knew our learners so well by that point, and we had talked to them so much, we were far better equipped to be a guide on the side instead of a sage on the stage, right? We're always looking to be that guide on the side with our audience. So some of our audience for the pilot, or some of our learners for the pilot, were our advisory council members. So we've been working very closely with them. Others were nominated by their leaders as those innovators and early adopters. We asked for their best and their brightest, and they sent them our way. It was really wonderful. And again, that nod to that diffusion of innovations theory that we deployed in this as a part of this design. One thing that was really important here for the trust is that we didn't claim to speak the language of this part of the organization. You all may be familiar with any large organization that sort of has different segments or different divisions, different teams. And there's, a little bit of a language difference, sometimes culture differences within teams. We did not claim to speak this language fluently. We knew enough to gain credibility with the learners and to earn their trust with us as outsiders. Because we had done this research and because we had them along with us for every bit, in a way that's really difficult to do if you're just talking to the experts who are sort of coming from on high, right? They're the people who know things at this high level. And it was really, really great to be able to connect because we had already talked with the learners so much. So we designed many of the elements of this program directly based on learner feedback. And so that also helped us to gain the trust too, is they could say, wait a minute, I was a part of that. I talked about this. I said I wanted this, and here it is right in front of me. And so just a couple of examples of that. We had a high degree of interactivity to promote that networking that they wanted. We created workbooks that had that tangible action plan. You remember from Nick's first slide there where we talked about they wanted something they could take away. I want something that I can do with this rather than just learn it and then go and do things the same way. And that helped us to justify those virtual sessions because we have them develop the plan in the residency. They come back in the first virtual session, they get some coaching, they report out on what they're doing, and then same thing in that second virtual session. They're supported throughout that process. And we also had support from the highest levels of leadership, which was really wonderful. We were able to advocate for that because learners needed to feel empowered to do their part for culture change and know that they were empowered to do this work and that they had the support from the highest levels of leadership to do this work. And you all can see that middle picture there in the top. The Undersecretary for Benefits joined us for the pilot for a short time to provide remarks. And he has done that with us for all of the subsequent CXL sessions as well. So really empowering those leaders to get in there and improve customer experience from where they sit. And last but certainly not least, we modeled a good customer experience all the way from the time our learners enrolled in this course all the way until now, until they're alum, right? Like all the way through their alumni experience. And we really were intentional about wanting to show them what that felt like to be taken care of, to be cared for, and the small but very intentional decisions that we made in the classroom, and the small, seemingly small things that we did to make that classroom environment really awesome. We gave them those examples. Hey, wait a minute, I could do that in my work. So it was pretty great to kind of see those light bulbs go off as well. All right, let's quickly talk about evaluation. Next slide. Yep. So I'm going to gloss over evaluation in this. This could be its own presentation, and I would be more than happy to nerd out with any of you on evaluation for CXL and beyond. But I'm just going to real quickly go through this. So we developed an evaluation approach that captured input from both our teams, so the design team, instructional designers, and human-centered designers. That included our observers, our facilitators, our operations team as well, and the participants. So we weren't just getting the feedback from the learners. We wanted to know from our team, in the spirit of human-centered design and employee experience, how did it feel to deploy this thing? How did it feel to do this pilot and to get to this point? And we chose key moments in the experience to do this, to collect this data. So typically we measure the success of a pilot using the Kirkpatrick model, and typically to level 3. So we want to see that behavior change. If we're investing in a pilot and a very high fidelity prototype, we want to know that it was able to change behavior so that we can advocate to continue doing it or say, wait a minute, that didn't work, and pull back where we would need to. And based on those results, we refine the curriculum. We will deploy a finalized version, which we have done for CX Essentials for Leaders. And this year, we're really, really excited that we were able to go beyond level 3 and dip our toes into level 4 to show a little bit of impact. We're still working on that. So we're just dipping our toes in there and kind of piloting, prototyping what our evaluation strategy is for level 4, but really, really excited to report that we were able to do that using what we call using value creation or impact stories with CXL. Again, that's its own presentation. Maybe that'll be an ISBI presentation in the future. So next slide. All right, so what happened? What did we find? What were our results? So we found that learners were making changes when they got back to their desks. We measured behavior change through a check-in survey, through observations, and our recorded notes during the virtual sessions. We do that in every virtual session, not just for the pilot. We're always taking notes on what our students are doing. And there was clear evidence of this behavior change across all attendees in the pilot. So every single one of them did something that demonstrated that their mindset had shifted and they were empowered and able to do even the smallest thing within their teams to make a difference and improve CX according to what they'd learned or based on what they'd learned. So a few examples are here on the slide. One student implemented listening sessions with her team, so she had not been able to do that before, was empowered and equipped to go and have these listening sessions to better understand her team members and what they needed and to solve problems in collaboration with them. Another started a Teams channel for his team to share their successes, to share their challenges, to celebrate their successes, and to share ideas that they might have, and to figure out how to change their language, right? To change their language so that it was more customer focused and putting the human or the veteran at the center of what they were doing. And then this third example is where the student implemented anonymous feedback boards, or I wish, I wonder boards. We're big fans of those here at VACXi, and she was able to implement those throughout the building so that the employees in the building where she was working had that mechanism to go and put their feedback on the board anonymously, and in a way that they may not have been able to in the past. And so that leadership could take that and say, hey, wait a minute, this is something this person likes, I like, and then this is something this person is really wishing for, I wish, and something that they're really wondering about, something that they're curious about that we can just answer, right, that the leadership can answer. So very cool to see those happening. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick, and he's going to take us home.
All right, so we'll come back to where we started this presentation with our pilot participant, Lori. And if you recall at the beginning, prior to going through this pilot experience, Lori was feeling that she was too far removed from the veterans' experience to really be able to make much of a tangible impact. What we ended up seeing at the end of this experience was that Lori was able to make a really substantial substantive change directly in a process that affected veterans' experience. There was an opportunity to create this additional layer of transparency through a benefits decision process that was really difficult to navigate. And we've got a great quote from Lori here. I took this as my aha moment for how we could really affect customer experience, even from our level. Lori was a model student, went on to become change management certified, and now sees CX in all sorts of different places that she applies her work. You can see her other quote here, thinking about the end user can help make the change easier to process and more bearable, and that's customer experience. So really, Lori's one story, we shared 3 on the previous slide, but this is a program where we see routinely 95% of action taken that are meeting the objectives of this program after the fact. And we collect that information through our evaluation approach. So a really successful program for us, and one that we attribute a lot of that success to the approach that we took here. So I will close this out with attempting to give you the sort of selling point on why you should incorporate human-centered design aspects into your traditional instructional design process. I do just want to caveat before I do that we were set up for success here in a lot of different ways. This was a program that the ask was coming from someone that was already an advocate for customer experience and human-centered design. We had great partnerships. We had a team that had both human-centered designers and instructional designers on it. We had direct access to our learners and the ability to have conversations with them instead of only getting access to the subject matter experts. So we recognized that this was a unique situation where we were able to make this happen, and that maybe not every circumstance does human-centered design make sense to integrate with ADDIE. But say you find yourself in a situation where it does make sense. What we found is that incorporating human-centered design and ADDIE together uh, benefits you in that it helps you rely on what the learner's actual experience is instead of relying on potential sources of bias like your own perspective or that of your subject matter experts. It allows you to find new ideas and create new ways to deliver training in ways that you might not have thought of before. Human-centered design bills itself as a very innovative process, and a lot of that innovation comes to the forefront whenever you're forced to get outside of your own perspective and consider someone else's. Definitely, we operate within organizational constraints, so justifying resources is a common challenge. Uh, there's a great benefit to being able to say with confidence that we know that our learners are asking for this. We've got strong confidence that they're going to engage fully in this training. They're not going to just, um, sort of lackadaisically participate in it. And that's a great way to be able to get that justification of resources with leadership. And then finally, you might have skeptical learners that are not as interested to engage in your training. And we know engagement is key when it comes to good learning. We certainly had skeptical learners. I remember there was a learner that came up to me during the pilot and said, I really expected that this program was just going to be a waste of my time. But I will say that I'm really impressed and I'm taking it seriously. And so that's the level of buy-in you can get whenever you have taken the perspective of your learner. People believe that they're going to be taken care of whenever they know that their peers were able to contribute to the structure and design of the program. In terms of the learners, they get access to a training in the way that works for them and the way that they would prefer to have it. Learners often aren't put in that position to be able to say what modality they want to learn something or how they prefer to learn it or what the activities might look like or where it takes place. Giving the learner the opportunity to have some say in those decisions allows them to engage more fully in the programs. It allows the learners to feel heard and understood. And that leads to the last takeaway here, which is you have the opportunity to create a really delightful, personalized experience. You get the ability to bring joy into your training, which matters a lot. One of the great aspects, it's a small thing in this program, but we sent out a pre-program survey and asked people to contribute songs to a playlist. And again, it's a small thing, but seeing people's eyes light up whenever their song that they contributed gets played. And we had people that took a lot of pride in the songs that they chose. And when it came on, they were like, yeah, that's my jam. Let's go. Um, it helped with the engagement. It was another side of that intentionality. And really, it created a great experience that our participants were buzzing about at the end of, and really made a big difference in their level of commitment to go out and take action after the fact. So last thing before we close and see if there's any questions, we did just want to give a quick nod to other related research. We're not the very first people to have the epiphany to incorporate human-centered design into instructional design. Design thinking, which is very akin to human-centered design, or human-centered design takes a lot of inspiration from design thinking. Great resource from Baller and Fletcher. If you're interested in learning more about how design thinking could incorporate into instructional design, you can look to the book Design Thinking for Training and Development. great resource that can dive into this topic a lot more deeply than we can in the time we have for this presentation. So with that, I want to say thank you for your attention and sticking with us through the presentation. Amy, any closing thoughts before we open up for questions?
No closing thoughts, just grateful that you all are here. Really excited for the opportunity to share the methodology with you all, and looking forward to your questions. Also want to say that if there's questions that you think of later on, there's our email addresses right there. Feel free to reach out to Nick or myself or both of us. We'll be happy to talk with you. And thanks for the opportunity, Lynn. Really appreciate it.
Oh, we are thrilled to have you. Thank you so much, both of you. It's good to see you again. And let's jump into questions. Does anyone have, I see someone posted one question. Where can we find out more about your process? I assume that means that the VA human-centered design process, just that whole CXI process that you use.
Yeah, our SharePoint site is actually internal, so we don't have an external website that outlines our process. But feel free to connect with me. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll be glad to talk with you a little bit more about kind of how we do it, how we develop, and go into detail in any one of these phases or all of them, if you'd like to. So we don't necessarily have one resource, but definitely glad to have that conversation.
Okay. Jackie, you would like to know what was the timeline for this?
Ooh, great question. And one that I'm thinking maybe we need to include in the presentation. That's a really great question. Nick, let's reflect for a minute if we can together. This was 4 months?
I think it started in December, and I want to say that we piloted in March, so it was right about 4 months. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Process.
Yep. I think we were piloting in the spring. Yep, of 2023. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Benjamin has a great question. Were there semi-structured interviews completed in person or virtually? And how was the method for interviewing determined?
Yeah, great questions, Benjamin. So the interviews that we did initially were completed virtually. So we were reaching our advisory team, all of this initial discovery work up until that residency was done virtually with people all across VA, across the country. However, our listening sessions, which were also sort of mini semi-structured interviews, were done in person directly after the course. And so we asked our participants to sign up for a 10-minute time slot. They sat down with us for 10 to 15 minutes. We asked them like 3 questions in order to get their feedback there. So it's kind of both. How was the method for interviewing determined? We decided that we would do singular interviews when we could. So rather than doing focus groups, we did singular interviews when we could, because we know that some person who is in the focus group can influence others in the focus group as well. So whenever we could, we did do a couple, and Nick, I'm reflecting here, so jump in. I think we did do a couple where there was more than one person, or we wanted to interview that leader and they said, hey, I really want to bring a couple more of my leaders in here. I really want to get their voice in there. So that was really a bonus for us. And we found that whenever we did have that and the leader chose to bring extra people in, that it wasn't that focus group sort of mentality that can take place in that environment. What we found was everybody had the opportunity and was encouraged by that leader to share in those environments. Nick, would you like to add anything to that?
I would just say in terms of methodology, we were really leaning on our human-centered designers to help guide that process. So Amy's done some human-centered design herself, so there is definitely that experience was there. But in terms of things like drafting an effective interview guide, what the flow of the interview might look like, how we were capturing the data, and then especially the synthesis process, really that was me stepping out of my comfort zone as an instructional designer during that process. But I think learned a lot and have built that muscle a little bit. But I would say definitely very inspired by human-centered design practices there.
Yeah, absolutely. And ironically, I was also going through my doctoral program at UWF and doing a qualitative dissertation at this time. So I was up to here in the qualitative data collection and analysis methods and had all the books right at my fingertips to look up these things and to work right alongside our HCD SMEs for that. So that was also, it was just really good timing to learn a lot of things and get to practice this.
May I follow up?
Yeah, sure.
What sort of tools did you use during the synthesizing process?
Oh, great question. So we used Mural, and this is the same thing actually that I used for my, I used the same process for my dissertation, my qualitative data analysis in my dissertation. So we used Mural for that. I'm trying to think in terms of models, what we employed. I referred to, I don't know that we like overtly used it and said, hey, we're going to use this. But I used Saldana's model in my head to think about like the data coming in and then what are the direct quotes, you know, what are the, is that coming in and then how do you form the category, you know, I can't think of how it is. I can see it in my head, but I can't describe it. But, you know, to get to those themes, to get to the point where you have those themes and insights in my head, all of that lined up. But again, I don't think we were like, oh, we're going to use Saldana's method like we would in our dissertations. Nick, you add anything to that on tools? I'm trying to reflect and think. I feel like it was forever ago, but it's also still fresh.
Well, the question was really pointed towards him because he was saying he was out of his comfort zone.
Well, so for me, we have a human-centered design certificate program that was the first learning program that we had put together. And so that was my first exposure to a lot of the synthesis process. And we have a pretty basic framework that we use in terms of taking qualitative data, going through clusters, data themes, and then writing effective insights. And I believe there's some inspiration from Luma Institute in there as well. So if you are familiar with human-centered design, you've probably heard of Luma Institute. They're one of the industry leaders in human-centered design training. But we borrowed some of the methodology from that as well. So for me, it was kind of sitting back and observing the first few times that it happened, and then it's a very natural process. I feel like that the human brain does a lot of pattern finding on its own. So once I understood what the process looked like, it was pretty easy to replicate, and we've done it several times on other projects. So
Thank you.
That's how I did it. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I did not know about Luma, so I've learned something. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mike wants to know, how is it going there now?
Swimmingly. It's going great. Super excited to report. So since the pilot, we have done, last year we did two sessions of CX Essentials for Leaders. Both, as Nick said in the presentation, we've seen about 95% success rate in terms of people going out and behavior change, really changing their behavior and employing those mindsets and turning that into the change in how they manage their teams and what they're doing to improve customer experience. So really excited about that. We will do 3 more CXL sessions this year with 25 per cohort is typically what we do. So we'll be able to train those more of those innovators and early adopters. And we have the approval to do that starting, I think we're starting in the spring. We travel to Baltimore, so we try not to travel to Baltimore when it's too cold. We've done that before.
We've made that.
That's where we hold the class. So trying to avoid that. But we start in the spring, and I think we go through the summer for CXL.
Just to add to that, I think one of the really great success stories, we had this concept of going after the early adopters and innovators, and there was this awesome example of one of our attendees. This is a program that serves an audience size of 20 to 25. One of the attendees went and put together a presentation and briefed it to 400 people on a town hall. So there is that great example to get through 400 trained employees at 20 people a session would have taken a long time and a lot of resources. So going after this particular audience did really pay dividends for us in terms of what the ultimate reach and that drip becoming a ripple effect. We really saw it in practice, which was cool.
I thought that was really good that you guys did the one with the people who were the leaders in the beginning. Sorry, I'm traveling, so I don't have a great connection, so I keep turning off the video. But that was very impressive that you got that additional 400. Great job, guys. Very nice work.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that.
We are a few minutes past the hour. We do stay for after hours, so feel free if you need to hop off. We'll have this recording cleaned up and posted hopefully in about a week. We'll get it to our super video guru Randall, and he'll make it look amazing. But if you need to hop off, I want to thank you for coming. If you want to hang around and just talk with our presenters, talk with each other about anything to do with performance improvement, instructional design, or just the world at large, you're welcome to do so as well. So Amy, Nick, thank you again for being part of our chapter and for sharing your work with us this week.